it does seem, though, that the international community is absolutely shocked about the images coming out of Gaza, and I don't think that Donald Trump is immune to that.
Straight to the Times front page, which says Sir Keir Starmer will press Donald Trump on Gaza when the pair meet at Turnberry later on. The president may have been on the golf course during his trip to Scotland so far, but he has still been busy. The Starmer-Trump catch-up follows the president agreeing a trade deal with his EU counterpart, Ursula von der Leyen, yesterday. The agreement will see a blanket tariff of 15% on all EU imports, which is half the 30% rate that the president had threatened to impose. Let's hear more about what we can expect today. Andrea Shalal is White House correspondent for Reuters, who joins us from Ayrshire. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning.
Very good to speak to you. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Are you enjoying your time on the west coast of Scotland?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm actually in Edinburgh.
Oh,
but,
fine.
Yeah, we've covering it from afar.
Got you.
Closer than the US for sure.
Well, indeed. And, close to these historic deals which are emerging from what was labelled, advertised, billed as a private trip. But President Trump has got to work. How significant is this deal with the EU, and who has won?
That's a really interesting question. It is a massive deal. I mean, it was described, using all those, words: massive, huge, enormous, and very momentous. And I think both sides feel like they came out of it with something important. So the EU has managed to escape a much higher tariff rate of 30%. That would have been really devastating for EU businesses. And the U.S. has come away with access to a vast market. We were on the phone yesterday with some senior U.S. officials who say, look, there's, it's a $20 billion market. There's 450 million people in Europe, in the EU. This is going to be great for U.S. companies. And I think both sides feel like they got something out of it. Ursula von der Leyen was very blunt and said to reporters after it was all over that, 15% was about the best that they could have done. But she conceded that the U.S. and, that the European Union has long had a trade surplus with the EU, with the United States, and that it was time to rebalance that. So we'll see. But, there are still questions, I must say, about some of the particulars and some of the details. And, we'll work that out. We'll figure that out in the next few weeks. One of the big things that hasn't changed, of course, is that the steel and aluminum tariffs still face a 50% tariff. So that's a lot of, that's still an area of concern.
Yeah, fair. And I think one of the sort of observations on this, as you've made there, is that this is a huge economic bloc, the EU, but perhaps maybe the deal involves broader commitment on energy investment and strategic areas, as opposed to the UK deal with the US, which has been talked about, I think still really a work in progress, if we're honest, but it's been talked about, which is really focused on more specific sectors, whether that be cars, steel, aerospace, some food as well. So there's kind of is that a contrast to draw between the UK deal and the EU deal, the kind of specificity?
I think that may be true, but I think that, you're also looking at a much larger economy. The combined size of the European Union gives it additional heft. So we still don't have any specificity about exactly how that, really large number of $750 billion worth of purchases in the LNG and energy sector is going to come together, what's included. And we were, journalists were asking yesterday how will the U.S. police that? And we're told that if the United States president feels that those purchases aren't happening, that he reserves the right to jack up the tariff rate. So bit of a hammer.
Yeah, indeed, well, isn't it always the way? Right, let's turn to the visit of Sir Keir Starmer to see President Trump later today. And the Times front page, the PM hopes the president will urge Netanyahu to increase aid and to, I suppose, take a kind of stronger line with the Prime Minister of Israel based on the humanitarian crisis which is unfolding in Gaza. Can you sense, Andrea, sort of any shift in atmosphere, tone, approach from President Trump ahead of this visit from the Prime Minister today?
I mean, we're told that the president really is concerned about the suffering in Gaza. I'm not sure. When he spoke to Ursula von der Leyen yesterday, he did speak about Gaza. He said that he expected to discuss the issue with the prime minister when he meets with him a bit later today on the golf course at Turnberry. His language has been very strongly supportive of Netanyahu. And, it would take a lot for him to break away. And he's just batted away the idea of Palestinian statehood that has been raised by the French President Macron. So I think we have to wait and see. It does seem, though, that the international community is absolutely shocked about the images coming out of Gaza, and I don't think that Donald Trump is immune to that.
Yeah, that's fair. How would you describe his approach in these sorts of circumstances? Because he presents such a hard front when he is, for example, berating the president of Ukraine in the Oval Office, or when he is imposing tariffs on nations around the world, or at least threatening to. It's interesting what you say there about him not being immune to these stark images that we are seeing emerge from Gaza. What's he like? Is he sympathetic then to the cause of human beings who are suffering there?
That's a tough one to answer. I don't know exactly, and I wish I had a clear answer for you. I mean, I just think that there is pressure from members of Congress and perhaps even from members of his family to do something about this. Now, one thing that one hears over and over again from associates of the president and from himself is that he, really does care about people. And, so yesterday he was moved, almost visibly moved, to talk about these families whose loved ones were hostages in Gaza and were being held by Hamas and have died. And he talked about, as I said, almost in very emotional terms, about how important it was for those people to receive the bodies back of their children and loved ones. So I don't think like I said, I don't think he's completely immune.
Yeah.
But we'll see. And I think Keir Starmer is going to make a very strong argument when he meets him today about the need for change.
Andrea, really good to speak to you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's Andrea Shalal, White House correspondent for Reuters, reporting this morning from Edinburgh on the President's trip to Turnberry. So the Prime Minister visits later.